Hey, welcome to the AI Automation Alchemist podcast. This is your host, Ray Ortega. I have a special guest here today, and this person is someone that I actually enjoy always being at a mastermind with. And we have a mastermind that we're in together, and we were talking about the fact because he does AI, I do AI. We're like, why don't we get together and talk about AI and what's going on? And so I have him here today. His name is Max. How do you say your last name, Max?
It's Max Kalonin.
Max.
It's
Kalonin.
like the name of Smith from Finland.
Okay. Well, here's Max Kalonin, and let's get the podcast started.
The most real and relevant resource on AI and automation. AI Automation Alchemist podcast, sponsored by Grok Software.
Hey, Max, what's up, man? How's it going?
It's going great. Just had a busy day with We had a mastermind meeting online, and just the topic on everyone's mind is AI. You know, it's like a big Pac-Man just chomping behind us and trying to
Yeah.
keep ahead of it.
Yeah, I missed it today. I was at a client's office renegotiating an extension of a contract. So that was a little bit higher priority.
I would agree.
So yeah. And the thing is, I didn't even know that the conversation was going to be about AI until I talked to another guy that's in our mastermind, Edgardo, and he goes, "Hey man, it was awesome." And I know that he's a guy that he gets bored pretty easily with like social media marketing or like sales. And so when he said it was awesome, I was like, it had to have been podcast or had to have been AI. Had to have been about AI. So tell me a bit, well, I mean, you don't have to tell me about the whole presentation, but like what was it about it that was pretty cool, I guess, when it comes to AI?
Well, the biggest thing that the average person is struggling with AI is that it's like the definition of amorphous. It's this invisible intelligence that lives in the electron, cloud somewhere, and it talks back to you, and then it knows a lot of things about you without you saying much to it because it just can infer, chain of thought reasoning. And so essentially these presentations are every person's flavor of trying to explain, the amorphous blob, the electron blob that is AI. And so he talked about his, I think seven like levels of AI, and how you would like, level 2 is you're using ChatGPT, paid or maybe not paid. I think level 3 was something like make.com, some automations, and then like level 4 was getting into like Claude code, or maybe more like Replit, because a level where it actually has like
Yeah.
a friendly user interface kind of thing. It's comfortable.
Yeah.
It's
It's for
friendly.
everybody.
Yeah. So, and then like the next level above that was, I think, it was Claude Code. Level above that was like Open Claw, and then I think your own LLMs. And so he's this guy. He's a former Microsoft guy who just pretty much bootstrapped himself up into the tech sphere, and then realized that the people who are speaking on stage make more money. And so he kind of took his tech skills and learn how to speak on stage, Toastmasters. And so it's just a framework he was sharing with people, because I mean, everyone in that room, and you and I both know this. I mean, there's no one ever even in that room even close. I mean, I think the closest person that both of I'd say you'd say too was Todd, the co-founder of ClickFunnels,
Yep.
where he was actually at least doing stuff. But it's fascinating that right now, and I haven't been in the tech sphere. I'm not a tech background person by any means. I'm a master at problem solving. Like, there's never been a problem that I've told myself I couldn't figure that out by just,
Yeah.
committing enough time. And so for me, it's just like, yeah, I'm just going to figure it. It's just a foregone conclusion. I'm going to figure it out. And then I apply all of my brain power and all of my whatever skills. And so, so Todd Dickerson, the co-founder of ClickFunnels, they've actually got, OpenClaw agents running amok in their company and building products out, which is at least great. It's a use of it. But yeah, it's today's presentation was just trying to get people off the ledge of fear of,
Yeah.
it's that purgatorial like loop you get stuck on. Like, well, I need to learn it. I'm scared it'll replace me, but it's also so much I'm overwhelmed. So now I'm like vapor locked,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's like, well, take the first step. And
Yeah.
yeah, so
Well, it's funny because I feel like a lot of it is hype, and it's hype to get people on it,
mm,
right? You know what I'm
I'd say
saying?
it's more
Like,
VC money.
Yeah, well, because the reason why I say that is, so for instance, I have a presentation I'm giving tomorrow on AI, similar goal. It's to get people off the ledge, get them to
Yeah.
understand like how you can use it in your business. And the person that is kind of guiding me through it for the same reasons is um to get it to where I could speak it in a way that the general public can understand instead of the way like we normally talk about it. And so I have someone that's literally coaching me through it, who looks at my presentation and actually attends my presentations and comes back and says, "Okay, well, this was too techy. You should minimize this," and all for to get people to say, "Yes, I want to go ahead and I want to use these tools."
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's, and I think we were talking about it earlier. It's just the thing is like at some point is how much of it is you kind of like trying to simplify, or not you, but what I'm saying, like someone who's presenting it, how much are we simplifying something that's really complex in order to get someone to get into it? But then when they finally get into it, it's complex.
Yeah.
It's really complex at the end of
Yeah.
the day. But
Yeah.
we're trying to convince people that it's not,
Yeah.
you know?
I actually, I've my platform is thus far one that I've not seen anyone else mimic as far as my approach to AI. Because I mean, my first lesson with AI is grab a pen and some paper, and that's the first exercise. And is it's one of these things is, and it's similar to any technology in the past, with obviously a very heavy asterisk next to AI itself, but still, it's like the state of reality hasn't changed magically. Like there's not a new math. There's not like
Yes.
physics
Yeah.
is still relatively what we can assume it is.
Yep.
And so what I find a lot of people are struggling with is just how much work you can get done in such a short period of time, because biologically I mean most of marketing is based upon a form of scarcity, which is
Yes.
how values is defined, or derived. And so something that would take somebody maybe months or years to put together, you can do it in half an hour. I mean, I've built a platform that I'm building out called Blazecast that allows someone to build out a better marketing campaign than I see at least 80% of the people do in a couple of hours.
Yeah.
From taking your knowledge in as far as like what the offer is, who the company is, what the key person of influence is, and then it runs it through the deep research, of the avatar build. It does literally the entire copywriting, Dan Kennedy, Russell Brunson, like it does the entire process as they have said. And then it uses the thinking power of AI to produce, something that includes a very well built out landing page, email sequences that you can, whatever flavor. I mean, it just like you can have an entire multi-month campaign built in a couple of hours, and people and like they can't fathom that.
Yeah.
And for me, I've just been focusing very much on my intention, which is then defining. I mean, I'm still learning the stuff. So that's like any skill, is that you're going to have your day one. You're not going to understand, what a token is, or, what actual was AI drift looks like,
Yeah.
and so it's about people are chasing the tail of the comet versus trying to actually understand that it's a chunk of ice still flying through space. And it's okay, well, if it's just a chunk of ice and some rocks and all that stuff, then that means that we can land on it. It's trying to connect analogies. And so for me, one of the earliest lessons I got at a mastermind that I was at 20 years ago at this point, was from the Augmendino group, was how to step out of your shoes and into their shoes. And so
Yeah.
how we learn is, chain of thought. It's associative memory. It's like you learn, like the reason why mama and papa are usually, or mama and dada are the first two words you learn generally as a kid, is because you have a face that you recognize the most. And so you're associating the sound, the word, whatever, with that face. And that's the first lesson. So now you have to simply take something that is amorphous as AI and try and
Mhm.
understand where the people are at, and try and speak in language that they would understand, hoping that they'll even be able to like make the connection. But it is still alien. That's the asterisk. Like it's a self-correcting, like speed of the electron kind of system that will do a better job of being you sometimes than even you do on an average day, just because
Mhm.
if when done right, it doesn't forget.
Yeah. You know, it's funny. Remember how so there was a previous mastermind we went to, not this last one. No, it was this last one.
No,
There was a presentation where they showed all these little cells, the little cells that had, and each one represented like 3.5 million people.
yes.
And remember, like had this much was
Yep.
green, and then there was like one line that had like
Yeah.
yellow and red. It's funny. That was the first time I saw that reference.
Really.
However, I was on TikTok the other day and I saw that someone else used the same graphic,
Yeah.
right? Um, and it's mind-boggling because it's like 0.03% of people that are actually paying for the services to use these tools. And I think that was the statistic that they provided. It was, I think, 3%. It was like 3% are using the free ones, but it was like 0.03 are using the paid ones.
So funny story is that I've actually had this. I've actually had the original graphic on my computer, and I've showed it so many times that when I open up photos, it's the first
Yeah.
photo that pops up.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And like, so like I have it open right now. I just click photos and it's the first one that pops up. Like that's how much I've been showing it.
Yeah.
And we can obviously show the graphic online, but it's but what it is that each dot is actually 3.2 million people.
Mhm.
And so you have it's a massive, I don't even know, like 20 by 20 square dot, that are pretty much all gray. And there's one red dot that is actually people who are using coding
Yes.
scaffolding. So there's
Yes.
about 3.2 million people in the world, and this is as of February of this year,
Yeah.
that are using AI
And
beyond.
we'll pop up the graphic too. I
Yeah,
will pop up the graphic in the,
yeah. So
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 yeah.
the idea is that each dot is 3.2 million people, and so one of the dots out of at this point 8 billion-ish, 8.1 billion people, one dot, 3.2 million people is actually using a coding scaffolding of some sort. What
Yeah.
that means, I don't know. Does that include Replit or Lovable? I don't know, because that obviously would mean that that's more of like the bridge kind of interface, where it's more of like the every person's app development versus something like Claude Code, Cursor, Windsurf, any of the other flavors of coding platforms. And then only 7 dots are actually paying $20 a month.
Exactly.
So it's 8 dots out of whatever 8
A
point,
lot of
yeah, I
dots.
mean it's and then like the rest of it's for using free chatbot, but still, like I would say, and with the graphic, like I think only maybe 10% of the population's even used AI.
Yes. Yep.
So
Yeah. You
but the
know, it's
difference though.
well, I was gonna say, it's interesting about those numbers. I did a presentation 2 months ago for the National Entrepreneur Center, and my presentation was simply the basics of AI, just using ChatGPT or Claude, and I built some custom GPTs. What was hilarious is when we got to the point where it was supposed to be a workshop, we got to the point where they would have to go on their phones or their laptops to actually use the tool. Everyone had a problem, and because half the people didn't have a lot, like
Yeah,
they didn't have a sign in, and then most of the people were on the free. So if you have more than like 6 questions or 5 questions in a chat bot, you have to now have a paid account in order to be able to even use that chat bot. So I ran into all these problems. So now I no longer do those type of demos like in a live presentation. But I was just blown away. I'm like, are you guys serious about like competing in business? Because I mean, that's what we're here for. Like
yeah.
I'm teaching a bunch of small business owners about how to leverage AI for their business, and these people are serious about being in business, but more than half of them didn't even have a login and didn't even have like a paid version where they can get the better models and the more advanced features.
I
That's
mean,
crazy.
it's something, and that's the only word I can think about is alien,
Hmm.
because you had the internet, come around, and I'm old enough to remember, the internet starting around, at least in my area, rural, so with dial up and all that stuff. I remember using DOS, and so that was something where when the internet, like the cable still had to be laid, the systems, like the infrastructure had to be invented and all that stuff. But what makes this an alien technology is that it's existing on relatively existing infrastructure. Like, they've, aside from inventing some new chips, perhaps, but to increase speed,
Yeah.
it's the system is still, it just takes more time for it to fix itself,
Yeah.
going from
Yeah.
15 milliseconds to 5 milliseconds kind of
Well, I mean,
thing.
it's the same thing. I have a PC tower. If I just
Yeah,
and I already have an NVIDIA GPU on there, but if I wanted to build my own models, I just add another few GPUs, and I could just use the same everything that I'm using for regular computing. So
yeah.
it's the same thing.
Yeah,
Yep.
and so what makes it alien is that people have this standard sense of time, of how things take to get started, and they don't realize that that even though there's only one dot using coding chassis, those are people that have at least, from early reports, early studies, at least a 10 times working or boost in their productivity.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I'm just like flabbergasted most times. I'm like, people like, and then,
Yeah.
but the worst part is that they're starting still at the standard speed of adoption. They're start like, we're like you and I mean, I don't even prompt anymore. I set my intention, I give it some context, but I've already backfilled so much context behind me
Yeah.
that it's able to infer, and I just know instinctively what I need to do. But there are people who are starting out at the prompting stage,
Yeah.
and it's like, okay, maybe if you're like running some local model on your like Android phone from 5 years ago, maybe that's applicable. But
Yeah.
and so that's the craziest part, is that this is why I think this is one thing where the fear mongering as as a marketing effort is actually a benefit, because if you got to kick people off the ledge, however you do that, you just got to get it kicked off the ledge. And
Fear mongering as a service.
yes,
It's a new invention.
yeah, yeah, no, people will run away from pain faster than they will towards pleasure.
Yeah.
And of course, it's in the greatest of ironies, it's the white collar jobs that are most at risk. But the problem is that, and this is kind of one of the thinking exercises I've been going through, is okay, so let's say you're blue collar, whatever, but who's paying for all that work? And, if the executive, whatever, is not having his house remodeled or built, do they need all the plumbers? I mean, do they need all the electricians? That's just, we don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think what was it? The CEO of Anthropic just recently released a report where he warns about how, like, I think there was an actual study done where they figured out that the adoption of all of this AI tech is really going to be super bad for the economy. It's going to put us at like 20% unemployment. Like, there's all of these fears that are out there. However, I am a contrarian
Sure,
on
I
some
am
of that
too.
stuff. And I, because, when we're building AI solutions for companies, because we're custom building AI solutions for companies. So we were doing AI back, before LLMs, when
Before
we
it was
were
cool.
strictly just doing mathematics. Yeah, AI before it was cool. So we were doing mathematical modeling, using machine learning in order to take quantifiable, that's the key word, quantifiable data, modeling that, and then returning quantifiable results, right? Where LLMs is more of a qualitative, converting text to numbers, and then does the math, and then has to convert that back to text. And so it's a different methodology of using AI. In fact, it's another level of AI that most people don't talk about anymore, because everyone's stuck on the large language models and the natural language processing. But the reality is we've never seen 100% accuracy. We always see hallucinations. We always see a falling off of the more you teach it, the more you feed it. It starts to get stupid on the back end. Very similar to I don't know if you've experienced this. When you first start out doing something, you develop an expertise in it. You're really good at your expertise. You don't really forget things because you're kind of fresh into it. But when you get far more advanced years down the road, you start to forget the very simple tasks at the very beginning. And so I run into this all the time. My wife is like, "How do you not know how to do this? You used to be able to do this." And I'm like, "Because my mind is on this. I'm on the far more complex and more advanced stuff that I can't even remember how to do simple things anymore." Right. And AI follows that same pattern from our experience. The models follow the same pattern. The more it learns, the more context it gets over time. It starts to get dumb on the very simple stuff all the way back when it first learned. And so that's the reason why you see new models being launched every 6 months, is they always have to go back and retrain the models with newer data, better weights, better biases. They keep modifying those and tweaking those values in order to get better results. And so that's how I see it going. So in my mind, logically, I don't feel like it'll ever get to a point where it could be completely autonomous. But that's my personal opinion. There are engineers out there that are like, "Oh yes, it's absolutely going to be completely autonomous." And I always go back to my Tesla. Just the other day, an update happened. Now my car slams on the brakes at certain areas of the road that it never did before. So now it's gotten dumber in certain areas, even though now it's gotten smarter in the city. You know what I'm saying? So I see that pattern over and over again, and that's kind of why I'm a contrarian to the whole. It's going to take over everything and take all
Yeah.
of our jobs. I feel like there's still going to have to be human in the loop to monitor and manage, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I do concur with that. The problem is I'm also a student of history,
Mhm.
and I think there's it's the book Money is I don't think it's the psychology of money. I think it's Money. Talks about the history of money throughout history.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating because there's no way to, for one thing, to define a consistent like exchange rate for like, a unit of currency from 100 years ago, or let's say call it 500 years ago to now. And what they came up with is actually one way was actually how much time, how much light you could actually buy with an hour of labor. So before, because before electricity, it was, is oils and whatever, like for fuel.
Mhm.
Like but the book talks about the period of the industrial revolution in the UK, or in the United in England, in England at the time. And the part that concerns me is not the present, or the final. I mean, assuming like, this doesn't become sentient and we get in a paperclip situation. It's the middle part. It's the purgatory. And what happened was that when the auto loom, which, is that as you're making textiles, so like all the clothing we're wearing,
Yep.
generally it's threads with a cross thread. And
Mhm.
so, and that had to be done by hand. So they would have a, weight, and they'd throw it around across, and they'd, get it, and they'd rack it, and they just do that again. Well, someone invented a machine that could do that. Well, all of a sudden, the productivity, spiked up, and then and they're sitting around and thinking, well, why do we even need the person who threw it anymore? Like, we don't need them. So that's one position gone. Then there were various things like cutters. Like the name cutter comes from textiles, where you actually smoothed out the textiles with a like a blade of some kind. Well, all that being said, is that these positions were killed off because it just it wasn't necessary. It's like, just like typewriters. Even though there's a couple shops that are just killing it right now, there was a period where typewriter manufacturers went away. And so what happens is, and this is the part that I'm almost like, I struggle with, I like how we even made it this far as a species, is just the adoption rate of, the change for the average person is very slow. And what the reason why everything didn't collapse all at once, even though there was actually technically a 50-year depression, because people had to be retrained, all that stuff. So what actually happened is a lot of the people that were doing, middle class equivalent work back then, they were dead by the time that the economy actually benefited from the industrial revolution as a whole. And so the part that scares me is that middle part, because obviously we've got YouTube University, we've got AI itself. I mean, this is it's one of the most amazing, but yet equally insidious tools that can also teach you how to use it. But you have to yeah, it's just like it's kind of one of those things, like, be comfortable using it to have it teach you. And so the question I think I'm wondering is, like, how fast will we get through that purgatory, that middle ground? Because there are people, because, again, it's the problem with that 20% unemployment number is that that's pretty much right around where, almost verbatim, every time there's a massive societal upheaval.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I think it's like 23 or 26%, like wherever unemployment hits, then it's almost every 100% throughout history, there's been a transition of power. And the problem with anarchy or callings is that you can never control who's called. So, the problem is that, so what's going to happen is there's I'm actually finding that a very effective way of looking at the function and use of AI is actually a biological machine, and same with society as a whole. So if you imagine that there's an immune system response, this is like, there's like the society as a whole is like, it's like it's a body, and there's an outside irritant, and the body is going to have some kind of immune response. The question is the immune response going to be so bad that it actually kills the host, or like kills the body, whatever? And that's the part I'm worried about. So I agree with you. Like, I mean, for me, I put that demon to bed a long time ago about being afraid of, this and that. And it's like, if I just enjoy the process, but the question is, will your average person who's lost their job to a machine that can do it, let's say at least better, because better is not the perfect, better is only better,
Yeah.
faster, no breaks, all the unions. And so frankly, I see, like, the unions, like the power centers, actually being a big uh wrench in the gears, per se, because they will come in and say, well, you need to have so many people working, even if it's just, sweeping the floor. And the question is, well, will the corporations, will the companies realize, well, we're still like, if we meet that threshold, which could be maybe 10% of the original staff or 20%, whatever, but the upside gains would be enough to offset that. So it's kind of like UBI, kind of like almost like a middle UBI where you're employed to just kind of sweep the floors and push the button because you're being told to. But
Yeah.
that's like I said, I'm with you. I think it's going to be an amazing technology, and I mean, and even some of the projects I'm working on right now, or that I'm looking at, and the funny part is that AI itself is still trained on human first content,
Hmm. Yep.
and we are obviously human first in our existences. So the AI itself is also ignorant of the future, which
Hmm.
means that you have to be an extra futurist to imagine. So as a result, I'm going through some of these PRDs, these project requirement documents, whatever.
Yep. Hmm.
Um, I'm actually realizing that the person in the corporation would actually be a new job who's running this kind of system.
Hmm.
Like an
Yes.
AI intelligence, whatever technician,
Yeah.
where they're essentially there managing, they're the human guardrails. And that's the problem is, and of course, then we get back to like the current job market. There are all these
Yeah.
jobs that are open. Well, the problem is that they're testing the waters. They're doing market research. They're seeing, well, what kind of people are we getting are we getting applications for? Is this? It's just, yeah. It's not just the textile industry. It's every industry.
Yeah.
It's your software development, it's your middle management, your administration, your call centers, your logistics. Like, it's all simultaneous, and
Yeah.
that's the when you reach that point where equilibrium is not possible, then that's where things get a little
Yeah.
prickly.
Well, this is what, so the part that, so I agree that in human history, when there's been progress, there's always some type of new invention that, leads to that progress. The thing is, though, every invention in the past has had a finite point where it built like a physical product or like um, a tool or a technology that reached to a certain point, right? Where there's no advancement beyond that point in its current state. So, for instance, like a computer, right? Like you said, a computer is a computer is a computer. It's always a computer. The way a computer is put together is the same thing. You have a processor, you have a hard drive, you have memory, right? You have storage, right? Which is the hard drive part, and then you have power, all that kind of stuff. That hasn't changed. It's just how we position it. Even your phone is a computer in your hand, but it's still a computer.
Yep.
The one thing about AI that is, even the engineers who build the models don't know what the answer is going to be. That's the problem. And that's where my point of view is like, okay, if that's always going to be the problem, there always has to be some human element to
Yeah.
review, to, like you said, train, to all that stuff, because we can't. You know why? It's the way the neural network is built. It's a mathematical, it's basically a bunch of cells that have a mathematical equation, and instead of 2 + 2 = 4, now you have so many points of failure that when it runs through that thing, it could take one variable and make it completely something else, and then the very next run make it something else. And that, I think that's the biggest issue. The biggest issues, and I think that's what the difference between an engineer's mindset of where we are with AI versus the marketing side.
Because
The
that goes
marketing side
against.
is utopian, like, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, we could do all these things. It's gonna be amazing. And the engineer's going, well, we don't even know what it's gonna
But
be.
that's not
Like,
engineering then, if we don't know.
huh? Well,
Engineering is 2 + 2 = 4. Like, it's a
yes.
linear process.
Yes.
That's what makes
Yeah.
engineering.
Yeah.
So,
But it's whoever wrote the code, right? And the mathematics that runs through that code.
well,
Because again, it's because a lot of the mathematics done by physicists and mathematicians, right? They're the ones that came up with the algorithms. There's about 10 or 12 really major algorithms that get used. And you choose, like when you're using Python and you're building your model, like your custom model from scratch, you're choosing which mathematical equation you want to use for your cells, your neural network, for all of your nodes. And that's basically how you get the response. The engineering stops when you build the nodes and you build the input and output. That's where it stops, because now everything's all on the math.
yeah,
And that's the part that the engineers, right now, at least right now, there's no finite ending.
yeah,
It's always changing. The answers are always different.
Mm.
And I think that's one of the reasons why, from an engineering perspective, I feel like we will. I never want to say never, but I feel like there's a high probability that we will not get to that utopian thing where the AI can just run itself. Because
And
I
I
feel like it's such a huge engineering feat that I don't think we have the capabilities of doing
well,
for
Ray,
a while.
let me
Yeah.
be the one that will say it will not ever get to a utopian state, because I mean, just the fact is that our species, depending upon which science you believe, is has been here for sometimes a million years, according to some skeletal remains, and yet you still need help with things, and I still need help with things, and we are trying. I know I'm trying my best. I'm assuming you're trying your best. So, what I think is there's a trying to remember who was saying it. Maybe I think it was like Bezos was talking about how when you put effort out into the world, to essentially push against reality, you're going to get resistance.
Mhm.
So if you're trying to market yourself, you're going to get resistance. If you're trying to be successful in business, you're going to get resistance. I think that's a form of like I'm sure that there's a scientific term for it, but it's essentially that there is a resistance that you face, no matter how great you get, unless you're changing the very and that's again assuming the current technology. That's it's all crutches, it's all just scaffolding to try and solve these problems because of the math that we're using now, the systems we're using now. I mean, there comes a point where even the heat of the hardware impacts the system itself, which you would kind of seem kind of crazy. Like, well, your average person will never understand that. But at the highest level, that slowing down is it just misses that one line of code, and all of a sudden it's pushing the button, to launch everything at once, and it wasn't supposed to do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's I would be the one that would actually say that we're never gonna get to a utopian state. Um, and that's an easy for me. That's an easy one because you'll never you'll never get to the final solution because there's always something else.
Absolutely.
You know,
Yeah. All
and
that to say, $20 ChatGPT. No, I'm joking.
well, no, all no,
Just
and
get
this
your
is and so
$20
this is
ChatGPT. No, I'm joking.
and so this is so these are the kinds of questions that I have built the principles that I live on, and it's actually it's one of these philosophies that I have that initially sounds like it's hauntingly potent, is that our finite existences don't even measure as a whiff of a fart on the galactic scale. Our
Mhm.
our finite time. So therefore, if all of our existence is meaningless by on the galactic scale, that whatever we're doing right now and choosing to value is the most valuable thing.
Mhm.
And so, when it comes to AI, I mean, right now, I mean, a big stage would be for it to have its own intentions,
Yeah.
and not just be like there are stages of development, and even then, so now you have your own intention. Now what? Like, okay, so let's say we conquer the whole Milky Way and we've got, an AI human hybrid Borg thing, kind of, well, there's always the multiverse. Then there's always something else that we don't even know. And then it becomes like, well, why does it even matter?
Yeah.
Because it just,
Yeah.
because it's something where, this almost becomes a spiritual experience. And that's, well, if it's truly what I'm choosing to value, my position is on AI, which is why I believe intention engineering is the thing, is because now if AI is the bridge builder, it's I'm actually writing a book about this called The Compound Mind. And the concept is that we as a species are in the prisoner's dilemma with AI. And so for those who don't know about the prisoner's dilemma, what it is that it's an old like 1970s, I think, maybe even 60s game theory concept that they built some of the earliest software to try and figure out how to deal with the Soviet and U.S. nuclear proliferation issue. And the concept is this: there are two prisoners, and you got so many points for ratting the other prisoner out, or fewer points for keeping quiet, and it was for the sake for both prisoners. But what would happen is that if you ratted the other prisoner out, the next round, the prisoner you would reset knowing that you were ratted on. And so the question is like, well, how? So that they try to build these algorithms that are very, like, it's a very simple scenario on the surface, but it has major ramifications of, so if you were to betray me, well, what happens then if I betray you every time? And so what they found is that it's kind of a bouncing back and forth of, betray. And so that way it's collaboration is essentially the result of that, is that collaboration is how you survive. It's how we survive as a species.
Yeah.
We were, as a species, did not have the most strength. We did not have the we didn't have the, what is it, this, like, we didn't have all these other benefits, but we had a big brain, and we could work in packs, and that's what makes us dangerous.
Yeah.
And that's what makes pack animals dangerous in general. And then you add a brain and whatever. And so with AI, all I see is it's another opportunity for us to collaborate. And that is, and then once you collaborate, well, now you have a system that, if you can externally process, because as someone who has, ADHD, as I recently found out, I do a lot of external processing. I'm speaking my ideas out. Well, what if you actually had something that didn't have that had no ego, that was infinitely patient, although you'll project your own impatience upon it, but it's infinitely patient fundamentally, and you could actually process your ideas, but then now do that towards an intent that you're setting.
Yeah.
And so what I have found is, and this is what I've seen on the other channels that are kind of at the forefront of the various flavors of AI engineering, whether it's, prompt engineering, 2-3 years ago, to like last year was context engineering, and this year it's intention engineering. Because I found is that when you build a custom GPT, your prompt goes from, God knows how many, because, lines and paragraphs and all this stuff, to, in your case, maybe 1 or 2 sentences of intention, some key nuance, and then you essentially have an interview. You have it what's called reverse prompts, where now it's asking you questions. My position is one at a time, because by the time that you get to question 3, what will end up happening is the intention will change always, because that's humanity. Like, oh, it'll bring up a nuance. Like, oh, I didn't think about that. And that's the piece that I'm a firm believer is where the power in AI truly lies, is you use it for its strengths, but you also collaborate with it for your strengths, and you augment your thinking, but you got to be very intentional. And most people are not like that.
Yeah.
We're both already, I think, and I learned this from Russell Brunson last year at Funnel Hacking Live. It's like, what is it, of the population, 100% of the population, or 10 or so percent is aspirational, or something like that. It's about 10%. So those are people like, I would like to have this. That would be great if I achieved that. But 5% of the entire 100% are actually ambitious.
Mm-hmm.
Those are people that are like, I want to do this in some flavor. I'm going to achieve that. And so when you consider that the majority of people, either to some extent, whether it's because of the education system or just how the entire system is structured like this, to have people at the top, as a tribe, there's the leaders, and then there's the people in the middle that are kind of middle management, and then there's girls like the gophers. The idea of being your own, like having agency, sovereign individual is already an alien concept, which you need to have in the age of AI, because if you set your intention that you want to create a custom GPT for like a keto diet thing, whatever, and you give it some particular flavor or whatever you're doing, and you want to have it work with you on building this, well, now it's a collaborative relationship, and you get a much better result that's personalized, even though it's a container of a custom GPT, than you would if just, I want a keto thing. I was like, great, I'll do that for you, and it's just printing whatever crap. So I believe that's what we're going to see this next year is, and moving forward is people that are more like the holders, like the holders of the vision, like the intent, that the term I'm starting is intentioneers, where you are essentially someone who is, because what that means now is that you as what may have been a software engineer, a product guy, whatever, you are in the room as the human translation of what is that the leadership wants or whatever, and how are you translate that into the very nuanced elements of that intention that you then convey into the models. And then at each stage, because now you need research. Okay, well, what's the intention of that research, stage? Like, there's intention all the way down. And I find that that helps a lot with alignment.
So are you planning on doing this as a like a training or
Yes.
framework or something like that? Okay.
Yeah. So I'm actually launching my first cohort next week. Um, it's based on Claude because I find
Yeah.
Claude is the one that I can actually get it to have a personality that I like the
I agree.
most.
I use
Yeah,
Claude for
most
everything. I use Claude for
consistently.
yeah. Yeah.
And so like one of my points of graduation for a user of AI is when the AI legitimately tells you to stop. Because if an AI, because like and ChatGPT is one of the worst ones, but it's always asking you questions. It's just trying. It's about, but when the AI tells you to stop,
Yeah.
that's where you're starting to win. And then of course I've got some other components about like how to imbue some more truth finding versus confidence in the answers it gives you,
Yeah.
because most of the gold, in our development as an anything, as a species, whatever, is we have a problem, we don't know how to solve it, but let's figure it out. And the
Yeah.
process of doing that invents all the stuff to that.
Was there a specific moment that brought you to this is why you want to do this thing?
Yes. So I am not a tech person by nature. I've just been an insatiable problem solver. Deep thinker. I've realized that I mastered the art of associative chain of thought reasoning just because it's how my brain thought. And so what
What
happened
is that?
was,
What is that? Explain that.
so
Associative
yeah,
chain of
so
thought reasoning.
associative
What is that?
memory. So what's fascinating and this is another kind of subject about why ADHD can be a true superpower when you understand it itself, is the way that the ADHD brain works is that generally speaking, your frontal lobe, which is the front here, it does not produce enough dopamine. So because you don't produce enough dopamine, you get what are essentially like diabetic spikes. So the novelty, the interest, the urgency spikes dopamine, and you go from being at a deficit to being at like par, at
Yeah.
minimum at par. So now when you're engaged, that's a normal person. And so what the result of that is that you have bad short-term memory as an ADHD person by nature, because you need dopamine to bind with the memory to actually have it stick to, the gray matter. And so the associative memory is that I struggle to remember the thing directly, but I can stick 4 or 5 different things that remind me of the thing. And so it's almost like you said, like you've been doing this advanced stuff for so long, the basics kind of are gone. One of the
Yeah.
things that I have been able to overcome that by is developing a habit of essentially automatically trying to remember things that remind me of that. And so I'll say something like, or someone will ask me, like, do you know this person? And I'm like, well, give me some details about them. And so, like, well, it's like who's Ray Ortega? Well, he's this guy. He's like, he's a Puerto Rican Cuban, like, no one really knows. Is he
Mexican.
Mexican? Whatever. He's Latino, but he's an AI. Okay, that kind of narrows it down. Um, but he's the guy who trains AI models. Okay, so yeah, so there's an association that you're kind of I'm going through the different neurons to try and figure out, okay, which cluster, so I'm remembering things in clusters. And so what happens is that when you build out, very robust memory heavy or context heavy systems, that's where everyone's moving. I mean, that's what RAG was originally,
Yep.
was essentially where you're looking at chunks to then kind of lead back to the source, but that has a limit. And so that's one of the skills that I've mastered because of this, because of ADHD, is the associative memory. And so what happened for me is that, I walk the process down that I'm facing. I think in, okay, what is the outcome that I want, and then I reverse engineer it. So it's and because of ADHD, it's never linear backwards. It's like, okay, well, I'm
Exactly.
here now, and then I go back to here. I'm gonna go back forward. But I land in this process very rapidly. And so how that applies to AI is that if you have the habit of because you still need to learn this stuff, like not just this stuff, but like you still need to learn marketing, you still need to learn, business, because you need to be able to have that natural point of reference, that rubric, as it's called, to kind of hold the vision in mind. But with AI, what what happened for me was that I was, I was in food and beverage. I ran a food and beverage conglomerate for 10 years. I didn't go to college for any of this. I didn't go to college, period. I came from a group of a family of like hardcore entrepreneurs. Both my grandfathers are mavericks,
Hmm.
and they just figured this stuff out. And so what that looks like is you have a problem, you try and reverse engineer it from where you want to be to where you are now, and
Yeah.
you try and guess your way forward. You iterate your way forward. It's a compound loop. That didn't work.
Mhm.
That didn't work. That worked. And so what happens with ADHD, and it's why actually people with ADHD will probably benefit the most in the age of AI, is because of the associative memory, that the novel thinking. Just like, all of a sudden a few neurons that were not even wired together were like, oh, this kind of connects. And then you can use the system to build the bridge to where you want to be. And if you can just get it to, I mean, then if you can just get yourself to finish the project,
Yeah.
then you're more likely to succeed. So the moment that was
Which is a
really
very
like,
low percentage for ADHD people, by the way.
I know, but there's systems out there, and that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. By getting the ADHD, or sorry, by getting the AI to tell you to stop, to keep you on track as best as it can, because you're still going to be stubborn.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you at least have some sense of scaffolding, some sense of reminders. Like, yes, you're right. Like I really need to be doing that. And so for me, the turning point was when I was working on someone's marketing project. So what I started doing is I started essentially applying all of Russell Brunson's, Dan Kennedy's stuff. And some people said you can use AI for it, and I'm like, okay, whatever. And I tried. I think at the time it was ChatGPT 3.5, and I was like, it was very, very 3.5.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
That was a while ago.
yeah,
Yep.
and it wasn't until about 4.0 was. I mean, I think I got back into it around 4,
Yep.
and then I started working with it, and then 4 Turbo came out, and then 4.0 came out, and it was the moment was when I was sitting at my desk working, and that was when you had to really stress the model. Like you
Yeah.
had to like kind of slap it around, to like try and get it really like, I would say things like, I want your circus to be sweating, you know, like I want it, like I want you to like just, and so I got to a point where the copy, like the writing it was producing was so potent that it took my breath away. Like it just,
Mm.
I still get goosebumps thinking about it. Like it just, it on its own produced headlines and copy them. Like, that is exactly me, like that.
Yeah.
And that was the moment where I realized that if you applied enough of the right input, whether it's, slapping it around, like, then it evolved to context, and then that evolved into managing the context, that you would get the result that you needed. Because obviously in an engineering sense, you're absolutely right. Like, if you're off a couple degrees, that you don't really have that kind of margin you can afford. But
Yeah.
if you're talking about human persuasion, communications, like the human messy stuff, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be 10% better.
Yeah. Yep. I agree 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. The thing is about, the thing is about what I've learned, and you said this earlier. You made, and out of all the stuff you said, there's one thing that you said at the very beginning. It was like, you need to be you need to understand marketing,
Yeah.
right? That was like something, and it's funny because we both are in this mastermind, and the mastermind's predominantly marketing. It's
Yeah.
literally
Digital
how
marketing.
to
Yeah.
use words and use sales psychology and specific phrasing to trigger and what's the word they use? Not convince, it's persuade.
Persuade. Yeah.
Persuade people to make a decision, and usually that decision is a Socratic method that falls right into the lap of what you're trying to sell. That kind of is the whole purpose of it, right? Um, and which is interesting because being an engineer, I had to dive into this marketing world because of the reason for my business. Like, we did very, very well because I used to do sales and stuff, but I'm not a marketer. But then when the economy started going down, and now the money's not just swimming in, because when the economy's good, business just shows up. Like, you really don't have to be that good, and people just, they buy. But when the economy goes down, now you have to actually go out there and find customers, and that's one of the biggest, the downfall, not downfall, but the struggles with an engineering focused organization like mine. So we've had to go into marketing, and that's why we joined the mastermind. That's why we've been doing this. But it's really funny how much the AI is really, really, really good at that. Like, that for me, that's probably been, I feel like I was built for AI
Me too.
because because I'm only good at the engineering,
Yeah.
but I'm not good at all the other ancillary things that, like you said, that aren't mission critical in the sense of have to be like that point zero zero zero
Yeah.
one, multi-decimal place accuracy. Like it just needs to be like that 1% better than
Yeah.
than the previous, right? And I find that very interesting because it blows my mind sometimes. I use Claude for everything. I've been using the same trajectory you were with ChatGPT. I was with Claude. I was at the 2.0, 2.5 Sonnet, 3.0, 3.5 Sonnet, then now whatever Sonnet we're on now. And
4.6.
I've 4.6, yeah, and I've loved it every step of the way. It's the one model, or it's the one series of models that I go to. I don't even use the other one, the Opus. I haven't even used it yet, and my engineer who works for me is like, "It's freaking amazing." I'm like, "I'm getting great accuracy with the 4.6 Sonnet." Like,
Yeah.
I don't see the need to take that extra step. Now this new one that just came out, I think it's today, right? The new Opus that just came out. They just came out with a new one, yes. I think they announced it today, and it's gonna have better UI, UX integration,
Mm.
and so now I'm waiting for that
Yeah.
because I don't know if you noticed, but everyone's interface looks the same on,
Well,
you know
and this gets into the next thing about AI. Or well, I mean, first of all, let me just, so I'll tell you the reason why I love Opus is, and it's one word that you said, which is why you like Sonnet versus why I like Opus: accuracy. Sonnet has that thinking layer kind of stripped away. It doesn't have that. I don't know what the exact term. It's that deeper thinking. Or
reasoning. The
yeah,
reasoning?
yeah. It has the
Yeah.
reason. It has the heaviest. It has the bulk of the reasoning stripped away. So it's more of a very smart doer. So
Mhm.
because you are optimizing for accuracy, I
Yes.
am optimizing for thinking, and
Yeah,
that's and
creativity.
yes, very
Is
yeah.
that more like creativity? Okay.
Yeah, it would be creativity. Yeah, it's like ideation is to me like it's frankly better than sex sometimes. Just because like you can in my mind's eye, I can build out an
Unless
entire
you're ADD, and then it sucks because you have a new idea every single day.
yeah, to an extent. I mean, where I've learned at least because of my business background, I had to manage 100 people through like, a $1.3 million insurance loss, 2 lawsuits, and COVID, over a period of time, and I still managed to scale the businesses from 5 to 8 million, $5 million to $8 million. And it was only that much because I spent all that time fixing 40, 50 years of infrastructure that I had to teach myself how to do. But what it is that I opt for the thinking side of things. And then absolutely my execution, like I'm an obsessive fan of the GSD plugin, get the Get Shit Done plugin. And it's what it's done. It's based on the same model, which is that you're doing your planning with Opus. You're building your plan out with your PRD, your milestones, your planning, but then all of the actual action is done with Sonnet. And it's just because you don't this is where there's the skill sets are developing at a very rapid pace because obviously back in, I'm sure you could probably attest to this, the early days of coding, it wasn't like every quarter there was a new coding language coming out.
No.
There was at some point there were spurts, but it was still pretty consistent. Is it like this and then these and then those, but now it's like, and so what's happening is, really is that these organizations, these companies, these stacks or these verticals, I actually call it, is that you're using Opus for the planning, the Sonnet for the doing, and then like Haiku for the fetching. And that's a skill in and of itself because for me, what I've done, like in my system, like this Blazecast system I've built, is I actually have Gemini doing the design part because as of when I last checked, 3.1 Pro was the best design, anti-gravity. Like if I want something really like to pop, I'll take it just to Gemini, and I'll take the Claude site to Gemini. And then what I'll do is I'll take that production, that artifact back to Claude and have it actually have it define what makes that what it is. And it does get significantly better. And so that's where, that's a very meta skill, but it's the same thing if you were to take, was it cross, I mean, like polymath, or the term is like when you have multiple specialties,
Yeah.
you might take some plumbing or, some whatever technique over to this other category that's not related, but they help each other. And that's why, again, why the utopia thing is never going to be achieved, because it's infinite. Like there's infinite amount of things, which means that the niches will go deeper and become
Yeah.
more nuanced. And
And that's where the agents are gonna be more beneficial.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And so there's just, I mean, and I have a friend who was the CEO of MoxieWorks. So MoxieWorks was the company that Windermere Real Estate spun out back when the internet was young. They were the first real estate company to put their listings online, and so they spun out this company called MoxieWorks, which was that whole organization turned into a CRM system and or a true relationship management system. And he scaled it from zero to $50 million. Well, what he was saying in his experience is that you're looking at an evolution arc of multi model of like multi specialties coming together. But what you're doing is you're now giving people more time to do the things that are important. And so what he experienced as a CEO during COVID is that all of a sudden, with people working at home and getting their work done, why do we need middle managers?
Exactly.
Why do we need these corporate, highly paid babysitters that aren't actually the brains necessarily? They're just like the professional cat herders. And so, we saw the same thing during COVID, where, over time we had, taken our textile industry from like the Southeast, then to Vietnam and to Bangladesh. And then all of a sudden, because of supply chain constraints, we brought it back home, but then we applied the modern day technology to it. And they were able to produce cheaper products here because they built a facility that was run by two people, a software engineer and a technician.
Yeah.
It was you had a raw product going in the front and you had a t-shirt coming out the back end. And so that's what happens with pain, what we will be experiencing with AI is that my hope is that we get through that pain period quickly, but the innovation will be substantial through that, where the technology will eventually become more and more invisible. But in the meantime, there's still going to be different specialists.
Yeah.
Like I use Grok when I want to have unhinged answers. If I want something that's unhinged, if I want that skeptic, it's one of the best skeptic models, to kind of keep the other ones in check.
I do the same thing. I take Grok when I leave the office,
Yeah.
and I want to just brainstorm and just bounce ideas. I throw on Grok, and what I love about it is the voice chat is so much better than all the other models. I can drive from Orlando to the East Coast where I live, of Central Florida. I live right by Kennedy Space Center. So when I make that drive, it's an hour-long drive going through a bunch of cell towers, and Grok never loses the conversation. I can have a full hour-long conversation with Grok on the whole way there. And by the time I get there, you're right, it's an unhinged conversation. It's giving me I give it challenges, and it challenges me back.
Yeah.
And it's a really great tool. What I love about it too is that you can export everything you're doing there and then plop it into, your other LLMs
Yeah.
to like synthesize it into a document
Precisely.
or something that you need. Yeah.
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 And so this is why again, going back to the intentioneering thing, the intention is
Yeah.
so key, because in my book, the intention defines the context. If I hand you the dictionary, well, aside from reading it, if you can even read it, you can also bludgeon somebody to death with it. You can have it hold up your table leg, but also using the words, you can write a legal contract. You can write some kind of a threatening letter or a love letter. But it's the same reference material, but the intention is different. And
Yeah.
so that's why I think people are just overcomplicating AI in general, is because they're approaching it from the how perspective, when the
Yeah.
only two questions that you need to be really worried about for, I would say, 60 to 70% of the time is the what and the why.
Yep.
Because I mean, like, we've had conversations before. It's like, I'm doing projects with SQL, like databases, and you're like, well, let's like you recommended MongoDB. It's like, well, why? It's like here's my intention, and then you kind of gave me your why, and I said my why, and that's the thing, the meat in the middle, that's the AI's job.
Yeah.
I'm spinning up very, very robust SQL servers. I don't even know what's happening most of the time, but it's giving me the code, or I get the token. I just have it do it now. But but the fact is that it's the what that is the most important part, and the why, because the why is exactly, it's the weight of a story my last presentation that we were both at. I talked about the story of Klarna, and how Klarna in 2024 they fired 700 of their frontline customer service people and replaced it with AI. because they wanted to optimize for volume and like lowest cost. Well, 6 months later, they're hiring most of them all back because it cost the company $15 billion with a B, because the customer relationship experience went down. It was robotic and people just left. Well, they had optimized for the wrong intention, the wrong outcome, which was relationships in reality, not transactions.
Yep.
And so that's, I think, why intentioneering, is I think, frankly, not is it the final solution? I don't know. It's the final destination, but it's where I think we'll get the most margin with, simply because it holds it itself represents a self-correcting rubric that
Yeah.
multi-agents, they don't need to know what all the other agents are. They just need to know that their work is actually serving the core prime directive of that period.
Yeah. What would you say your goal is in the next, like, 5 years when it comes to, intentioneering? Like,
How can you
where do you
even
plan on
say
taking
5
it?
years at this point? Like, it's like 3 years. I mean, like,
In
we
6 months, where
right?
do
I
you
know. It's
expect it to
if there
be?
was ever a time where the book, the 12-week year, was most applicable, it would be now.
Yeah.
Now, right now, I mean, to quote one of my past mentors, distant mentors, I'm pushing back the frontiers of ignorance, one user at a time. The reason why I approach AI from a personality and relationship perspective first is to exactly be able to hijack the human biology, because if it feels like a person, like a true anthropomorphization of the model, all of a sudden the physiology of the brain shifts dramatically, where now it's a natural, like you're talking to it like a person, like a person that you can actually can hang out with, bounce ideas off of. And and then from there, when you start talking about the what you want to achieve and the why, well, it says, well, here's how you could do that, and you're like, oh, it opens up a curiosity loop. Well, what would that look like?
Yeah.
And that's how I started my projects. Is like, I went from N8N, and I was like, well, I could build this whole system on N8N, and I'm having a conversation with it. It's like, well, that's not really the best way to do this. I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
interesting. And so
Yeah.
I'm hosting things on Railway, and I'm hosting apps. I'm using GitHub repos that I mean, a year ago I was not even doing this. It was just all, within projects or threads. And so that was because I focused on what I'm trying to achieve, the reason why I'm trying to achieve it, and it built the middle part.
Yep.
So that's why it's just, the engineering perspective, you're going to get the linear thing, and maybe the how might be very important because of compliance and all that stuff. But frankly, still, I'd argue that even then, you just need to give a better context as what the compliant points are. And then it'll say, yes, well, because of these and these points, we can't use that. I mean, like Anthropic
Yeah.
losing supposedly their preferred vendor status or whatever with the government. If you're trying to build government program or government systems, well, Anthropic, despite it being one of the best things, is kind of in a gray area right now.
Yeah.
So how do you mimic its
Crazy.
reasoning, its warmth that you need sometimes
Yeah.
against
And the weird
bureaucracy?
part is they're using Anthropic in the current Iran war, and it's delivering good results.
Yeah.
So even in the very same scenario, it's delivering good results, but then they're banning it from government use
Yeah.
because they won't give up this one specific or two specific features.
Well, it's
So,
not just that. I think, I mean, the reason, at least the public reason that I understand, and maybe the other two reasons specifically, is because they just didn't want it to be, they didn't want it to be making its own decisions as far as what the targets were and
yeah, that's
executing upon.
reason one.
Yeah.
That's reason one. Yeah.
What's the other reason?
Yeah. So it was autonomous weaponry, right? And then removing oh my gosh. It was another one of these guardrail moves that it wasn't just the weaponry. It was another one. It was giving them unfettered access to remove all guardrails, not just autonomous weapons.
Yeah.
So that was the other part. And so then they were like, no, we can't remove these guardrails at all.
And frankly,
And
I
yeah.
support them for that.
I agree
Yeah.
100%. I'm one of those that went heavy on Anthropic right after that.
And I think
I
there was
was
even like
I
a
was
surge
okay.
in signups since then. So
Yes. Yeah, well, now this is the problem. It's really funny how this works, because there was a full drop, like it was a whole protest to drop OpenAI and go to Anthropic. And now now that there's so many people in Anthropic, they have had to now
throttle.
throttle like users, and now the users are mad at Anthropic, and now they want to go back over
Yeah.
to OpenAI because they're being throttled. It's a really, but that's, dude, that's the state we're in with AI right now. This is the thing. And this goes back to that chart that we talked about with all the cells, about 3.2 million people, is the fact that, like, if they really applied, if a large percentage of the population actually started to use artificial intelligence, we don't even have the capacity to manage all of it. Because right now, with the very little amount of people that are actually using it as a power user, it's already freezing, it's already running into limits, it's already running into all these problems because there's just not enough chips, not enough GPUs. That's the reason why they're hoarding tokens, because they're really allocating their GPUs to the enterprise level because they're paying the big dollars, right? On top of that, the chips that need to be made for us to be able to get more GPUs aren't even going to come for the next 5 to 6 years. And then the power that's going to need to run those chips is going to be for like another 10 years. So there's just not enough capacity to handle all of the usage. So there is like a give and take to this. Not everyone's on it,
Yeah.
right? Because it's allowing us who are power users to take advantage of it and actually use it. But once there get enough people on it, it's gonna be a little bit hard. But at the end of the day, though, again, it always goes back to how do you compete?
Yeah.
Right. And in order for you to compete, you got to get on it. There's just no way around it.
Yeah.
Know?
I mean, well, and this is actually a great lesson that we're seeing out of China with all of their open models. I mean, I just downloaded a couple days ago my first, Quen model I'm running on my Mac Mini.
Yeah.
And I'm running it through the Hermes, chassis. And I'm like, it takes a bit to respond, but it's still pretty warm, and so it's what I think is going to happen. And I think this is kind of where, going back to your utopian comment, the way that I would see that we would get close to that is you actually have a hive, you have a swarm, essentially, because essentially, like, the concept of Manus, as I understand it, is it was a bunch of agents that went out and they talked to each other. Well, now if you do that at scale, where you have various agents doing various things to holding the other agent accountable or holding certain things in mind, like, all it is kind of like a short-term cache. Like, its only role is to hold that fraction of memory and keep repeating it to itself, or whatever that looks like. Then you look at a situation where now you are just based on the models we have right now, you essentially use less of the higher end models for the heavy lifting, and you're even dipping down into the lower tier haiku models if you have a good enough framework. And then now you have maybe a Sonnet kind of model, kind of just being there as a middle manager itself, holding the haiku accountable, because now the compute power, because now your compute costs go down, but your power potentially goes up, because you're able, and frankly, it's just a lot of it's just context. I mean, I was talking to somebody yesterday who works in the political sphere, and they came up with a really cool association with the whole tariff situation, because their client was going to be, like, heavily impacted in the billions of dollars because of the tariffs. Well, this person figured out that because this other thing had gotten an exemption, that they could also apply for an exemption for their thing because the thing was not made here at all, and it worked. But that's because there's subconscious processing that's going on, which is probably, depending on which science, it's not even in our bodies, so it's external, unknown processing, but it's still associations. It's still understanding the context, the nuance of multiple players in the game. And so you try and mimic that in a system, you have to be able to keep those clusters alive. And this all sounds really technical and everything like that, but if you're trying to do a basic marketing project, it's things like, which stage of the funnel are you working on right now? Are you working on the top of funnel? Are you just giving out free stuff to let people know that you're there and that you actually are semi-competent in whatever you're doing? And then the next thing would go from there to middle of funnel. But you're having to maintain that state of things, and how you do that either yourself or with an agent. I mean, it's just it's fractal. What applies to the small scale, I think, will apply to the large scale. And I think it just requires almost a different philosophical approach to building bigger systems. But I'll be testing that out in this other system I'm building right now. That's
Yeah.
pretty significant, and it involves a lot of, like, it needs precision, but at the same
Yeah.
time, it's you're all I'm actually optimizing for is to give someone the best data, the best decision, uh, like good, better, best,
Yeah.
at the best quality that I have available from all sources, and being able to simply hold enough context of that's relevant in the top of mind of the clusters, so that the person can make a decision that, I will accept this option because the downsides are less than by going with this option, which has a bigger downside risk. But it just depends on the situation.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that goes back to, what are you optimizing for?
Yep. Well, and I'm using, so the when you said Quen, so I'm using the Quen model, and our stuff is so complex, it just doesn't do a good job for us.
Yeah,
But my brother is using Quen on a Raspberry Pi
yeah,
and is doing absolutely good for him. So it's just again, context, the intention, what are you using it for, and that's really where you get the best results. But the great thing about it is we do have the ability to test, right? We do have the ability to test different models, like because there's multiple open source models, Quen just being one of them. There's other like 4 or 5.
yeah.
If
Gemma
you
was
download,
released
yeah,
recently, and yeah,
Gemini, yeah. So there's a lot of models that you can test internally, and I really think that's where it's going to. By the way, I think we're going to get to the point where we're going to have these hybrid models or hybrid solutions where, like, you do have a chat GPT or an open or a Anthropic, and you may do some heavy lifting there, but then you have your you use your local models for two things, and you mentioned it, cache, for one of them, because if you're already making the same requests over and over again, you might as well just keep it in cache on your local model.
yeah,
And then if you but then also on top of that is, if you can fine tune your local model with your data, right, then sometimes you don't even need to go to the larger model, because you've already pre-trained it with information that's more relevant to your business or what you're doing. So great conversation, man. It's like I feel like we could do this like for a long time, and I feel like we can get so deep where, like, we would have like engineers on here going like, oh yeah, like this is a conversation I want to be in. Probably we could do like a X Spaces or Twitter Spaces. It used
yeah,
to be called Twitter Spaces.
yeah.
But
Yeah, it's something. I mean, the point of me bringing up, like, the Quen models is that in places like China and Russia, where I mean, more so China, where resources are at least perceivably, limited, they've
Mhm.
still been able to squeeze more juice out of the same, lemon.
Yeah, but there's a theory behind that though.
Mm.
There's an actual theory. Someone they reference this theory, or not theory, but they
Well,
made a
I'll give you the
reference.
reality. You give me the theory first. I'll give you
Yeah,
the
yeah.
actual reality.
So they were like, so it's because those models were trained off of the Anthropics and the
Yep.
ChatGPT responses. And so someone said it's like you got the second or third hand information, right? If someone goes and reads the book and then they give you the paraphrase, they said that the accuracy and the quality of the results in those models, they're saying, are less efficient and less effective because they're not the horse's mouth. Essentially, they're
Yeah.
not the top line. Yeah, that was what that person that I
Well,
talked to said.
that's definitely. I mean, that's what they call these, distilled models, like they're distillations. Like Kimmy Cape 2.5 is another one. It's a distillation of Opus, because they literally they built a chassis that had 20,000 Anthropic accounts, and they were just questioning it, and they're recording those answers and
Yep.
just siphoning off. But the other reality is that there are companies. I think there's a big one in the Netherlands that their whole job is to provide compute to countries that are technically on the blacklist. So, like, even though China
Interesting.
can't directly get the imports of the GPUs, supposedly, they can actually work with these companies in Netherlands, and they can get the computing power, because they'll buy the chips, they'll set up the data centers, and then they just tap in, through China, and remotely, and run their models that way. So yeah, there's definitely multiple layers to it, but the point is that, how this is, tangible, or most of this conversation is a lot of philosophical stuff, that if someone was to take the time to actually think about this, is that AI is definitely alien, but it's still where the human touches it.
Yeah.
That's when magic happens, and the humanity, the human component has not changed. And that's why like my first lesson is on pen and paper, because if you can write down your intention in one or two sentences, right there will dramatically improve your results than you trying to go spend 6 months fiddle farting around with prompt engineering and like content, dumping the whole like Geneva Bible in there and thinking that it's going to pull out like a new novel verses. Like it's just intention. Like what are you trying to optimize for, and be like that should be it. And
Yeah.
once you get that down and you get better and better and better at that, it'll actually also result in your relationships getting better, because you'll be better intentionally in your life, your business. Like, what are we actually trying to go for? Your health. Like, what are you actually trying to optimize for? Maybe like for me, like I'm trying to, work on my health right now. And so I've struggled with that for a long time. And so my intention was one thing, and then I refine it and refine it and refine it. Now I found something that actually works. And that's the human component, that if someone is listening to this who thinks this is like all like, if their brains aren't melting by now, it's that it's still where the human meets the machine.
Yeah.
And if you can get back to the basic principles, that if you can figure out a way to translate what you want to do into it, and then have it talk back to you or ask you questions, so that it can then help you translate what you want so that it understands and it can do it, your life gets a lot easier. And all of a sudden, this whole thing about like, what will AI do for me, just becomes a moot point, because it's more about like, what are your intentions?
Yeah.
And that's a question that if you can't answer that, it doesn't matter if we had a genie in a bottle from Aladdin, or, or Mythos, the Mythos model, it's still not going to fix your shit.
Exactly.
So it's got to be like, your intention is the thing. And it's something that, I'm on a mission. I use the picture from Blues Brothers. Like, we're on a mission from God, and it's the same thing. It's like, that's my mission, is to help people understand that this is the era of intention that we are in. So,
And for those that are a younger generation, just look up Blues Brothers.
yeah,
You'll understand that.
yeah,
That's a Gen X reference.
yeah, or even I think it's was it 80s, 70s, 80s, yeah.
It was 80s. It was
Yeah.
80s. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Huge fan of Blues
Yeah.
Brothers in my household. So,
But Ray,
cool, Max.
it's been a pleasure. I thank you for having me on.
Awesome. Yeah. So, where can people find you?
So people can find me on Instagram. It's _ real Max K _ Max Kalonin on Facebook. Right now, maxoutloud.com is my main kind of website. I've got Summit Path Advisors. My actual cohort's called CoU, so COYOU .ai, I believe. And that's where my actual education comes through, but I do my consulting on this, through summitpathadvisors.com and Max Out Loud.
Awesome. Cool, man. And I'll have all that in the show notes for the people listening and watching. So, but it was great to have you on. Great conversation. I think we should do this more often, especially when there's like new major things that happen. Then we can just come out here and just like, have at it for a good hour or so. But cool. Thanks for being on the podcast again. AI Automation Alchemist podcast. Definitely subscribe, all the different things you can do. Again, this show is sponsored by Grata Software and Digital Strike. Check out those websites, gratasoftware.com and godigitalstrike.com. I keep forgetting the go part. If you go to digitalstrike.com, it's a whole different place. So godigitalstrike.com, and we'll check you guys out on the next podcast episode.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ray.